We just stepped on their face with a hobnail boot and broke their nose. We just crushed their face.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another edition of Glory UGA Plus. I am Tyler, and we've got some breaking news today as the Georgia Bulldogs have their man at quarterback in the 2024 class, with Ohio quarterback Ryan Finley choosing to commit to the G today over Florida and South Carolina. At number 170 nationally and the number 14 overall quarterback in the 247 composite, it's obvious that this is not the most highly ranked quarterback that Kirby Smart and company have signed, and he was clearly not the number one target at the quarterback position, as Montgomery himself said today in a couple of interviews that he wasn't given the green light to actually commit with a committable offer until earlier this week after Matt Zollers committed to Missouri. So he was not the number one guy on our board. But saying that, does that mean that he's not going to have a chance to be a really good quarterback? I certainly don't think so. In no way does it mean that. And look, I know that you're going to be sitting there right now and you're probably thinking, man, this homer is just trying to put a positive spin on things. Like, come on, dude. Like, let's just be real with us. I am being real with you. Just because the guy isn't ranked as a 5-star doesn't mean he can't be a good quarterback. In fact, let's think about the quarterbacks under Kirby Smart here at the University of Georgia. Who have been the two most productive quarterbacks in the tenure of Kirby Smart here in Athens? Was it Jacob Eason? No. Was it Justin Fields? No, definitely not Justin Fields. That didn't last very long. Was it Jake Fromm? It wasn't a 5-star, but a highly rated guy. Jake was really good for us. It wasn't Jake Fromm. Oh yeah, it's been Stetson Bennett, a walk-on, and Carson Beck, who was in the 250s nationally coming out of high school in the 247 composite. In fact, I have the numbers right here. He was the number 254 prospect nationally coming out of high school. So think about that. The two most productive quarterbacks that we have had were not the 5-star can't-miss guys. They are guys that were talented but needed some development. Guys that were, to be quite honest, not our first choice at quarterback in either one of those classes. Obviously with Stetson, he was a preferred walk-on. So if you think about that, and you compare that to Ryan Montgomery, I can't sit here and tell you that Ryan Montgomery is going to be Stetson Bennett, a 2-time national champion. I hope so. I don't know that. I can't even sit here and tell you he's going to be Carson Beck. I don't know that. But I'm using those guys to just illustrate the notion that just because Ryan Montgomery isn't a 5-star guy that has everyone screaming from the rooftops with excitement doesn't mean he can't grow into not even just a very good quarterback, doesn't mean he can't grow into an elite quarterback. We've seen that. Stetson, elite. Carson Beck, elite. That's who's been the best quarterbacks for us here under Kirby Smart. So if you think about Ryan Montgomery and why we decided to take this guy, because you might be looking at it and say, is this the best Georgia can do? Number 170 nationally, which, by the way, if that's what you're thinking, I mean, that's indicative of how spoiled our fan base has become, especially when it comes to recruiting. It's, oh my God, we signed a player that's, oh my God, he's just barely inside the top 200. I mean, what's going to happen in this program? All right, I mean, a little bit of perspective. We're okay, right? But our evaluative skills, at this point, do we not trust Kirby Smart and our staff in how they go about evaluating prospects? I know it was a very popular narrative early in Kirby's tenure that he couldn't develop talent, which was the most ridiculous and absurd thing of all time, even when people were saying, remember, there was a time where people were, it was just accepted fact that Dan Mullen was a superior coach to Kirby Smart. He was just coaching circles around Kirby Smart. The only thing that kept Kirby in the game was that he just recruited better. And obviously that's been clearly debunked at this point, but that was an idea that really lingered for a long time, that Kirby Smart couldn't coach and Kirby Smart couldn't develop talent. It was just about him being able to recruit guys, and he probably wasn't doing it legally. Well, I think we put that to bed now, right? Look at what we've done in the NFL draft. 55 guys over the last however many years that Kirby's been here, 8-9 years now? That has been debunked. We develop talent, and we not only develop talent, but we evaluate and we identify the right guys for our program, whether that's from a physical tool standpoint, but also a cultural standpoint. And Ryan Montgomery is a player with an extremely high floor. When I watch Ryan Montgomery on tape, that's what I see. I am not going to tell you that Ryan Montgomery is the most polished quarterback coming out of high school this year. I'm not going to tell you he's the most talented quarterback coming out of high school this year. because that's not the case. He's not right now. He's not as polished as some of the top guys. He's not right now. His talent isn't at the point right now as some of the top guys in the country at the quarterback position. But despite that, I still maintain the argument that I'm going to make right here on this show is that Ryan Montgomery is the right quarterback for this program. Now, hear me out on this. You might be asking, like, well, if he's not the most talented, the most polished, like, why does that make him the right quarterback for this program? You have to understand, guys, how important our culture has been to our success. Yes, Montgomery is a kid with a lot of physical ability. He might not be the most talented player in the country at that position right now, but it's not like he's, off the radar. This guy is a really, really talented player, really athletic kid, really good arm. That's a prerequisite. You got to be good to play at Georgia. We don't take scrubs. That never happens. Just because, he wasn't our top choice, but this guy can absolutely play. He's a kid with that kind of physical ability. But he also fits the culture. With a guy like Ryan Montgomery, when you listen to him do some interviews today, when you read what he had to say after his commitment today, I'm not saying NIL doesn't factor into his recruitment at all. Of course it does. It factors into everybody's recruitment to some degree. But it seems pretty clear at this point that NIL was far from the driving factor in Ryan Montgomery's recruitment. And if you've listened to Kirby Smart at all over the past year or so, especially during spring practice when he's been asked about NIL, it's not that we're not going to pay guys NIL. We pay all of our players some sort of NIL. And it's not that we're not going to get involved in the NIL game when we're recruiting. Of course we do, but we tend to shy away from guys that prioritize NIL over development, over culture, over winning, those kind of things. Because we understand that might not be a fit for our program. Ryan Montgomery, I'm sure he wants to get paid like everybody else, but you can get paid pretty well, but also set yourself up in a really good situation where you can develop, where you can win, and you can put yourself in position to make the big bucks in the NFL. Ryan Montgomery seems to be a young man with a good head on his shoulders, a mature young man who understands that. So, and also about this, with guys that prioritize NIL, we might land them right now, but aren't those the guys that are more likely to flip late in the cycle when a bigger offer comes in? Because that's what some of these programs do, right? They wait to the last minute. We don't have as much time to counter, and everything's kind of like just crunched there. It's all the time's all compressed, and they throw out a big offer at the last second, and it's just too tempting. The guy takes it. Like, oh, I don't know. Has there been a guy that we've kind of had a similar experience with like that recently? I mean, I think there was, right? I think it was Dylan Raiola, right? That kid, right? Yeah, exactly. Dylan Raiola. I mean, who saw that coming, right? NIL isn't that big of a deal to him. But the last second, I mean, I know Nebraska was home for him, but Nebraska was always home for Dylan Raiola. That never changed. What changed was he got a big freaking offer that he just couldn't turn down. So, the idea that what Georgia was to offer in terms of development and winning, when he offered that kind of money, and we were like, nah, man, we'll pay you, but we're not going to pay you that much. Well, he's like, all right, deuces, I'm out. And he goes to Nebraska. So guys that prioritize NIL like that, they're more apt to leave. There's a bigger risk with those kind of guys. With a guy like Montgomery, who, based on everything he has said at this point, now Raiola was saying a lot of the same thing. He was saying the right things too for a while. So there is that. I mean, you never know. You never know in college recruiting these days. But the guys that don't seem to prioritize NIL the way that some other prospects do, there's less of a risk with them flipping at the last second, right? So I think that's something you have to consider as well. He's also a player that's not looking for the instant gratification. Again, he made it clear several times today in multiple interviews that, he's not going to be a guy that, okay, if I don't win the job year one as a freshman, I'm out the door. He's not going to be that kind of guy. He's like, he even said I'm going to be here for 3 to 5 years. He said that. And why does that matter? Because he understands that he needs development, and he understands that our coaches will get him to the point where he is going to be a high-level player. All you have to do is look at Carson Beck. I mean, he mentioned him specifically. You look at Carson Beck, he waited his turn, he was patient, and now look at the dividends that's paying for Carson right now at this point. He's the top returning quarterback in the country, getting a lot of Heisman love, and he might very well be, I don't know if he'll be the number 1 overall draft pick, but he might be in that conversation. He very well probably will be a first-round draft pick at the very least. So he understands that, not looking for that instant gratification, because that can be a very dangerous thing. Because instant gratification is a fickle beast. You might get it, you might not. And if you're looking for it and you don't get it, you're out the door in the age of the transfer portal. You don't want that. It's hard to keep your roster stable. We got to keep quarterbacks in this room, right? We got to keep quarterbacks in this room. We don't have 4 scholarship quarterbacks right now. Probably to get one in the portal. So a guy like Montgomery will help you keep some stability in that quarterback room. He also seems to understand what this program can do for him. He's watched Carson Beck. He's willing to be a program guy. And those players are hard to come by, guys. The quarterbacks who are highly talented players that are willing to sit in the wings, learn, develop, take coaching, and be program guys and wait their turn. Those guys are hard to find. We seem to have found a couple of them, right? Carson Beck, Gunnar Stockton, Brock Vandegrift waited for a while. I mean, he waited about as long as he could, and then he had to get out the door. I totally respect that. But that goes back to our evaluation. Like, we are trying to find guys. They might not be the most highly rated guy. We did that with Dylan Raiola, and look how that worked out, right? I mean, you can land the most highly rated quarterback in the country, but are you actually going to get him? Is he actually going to sign with you? So you land a guy like this who might not be as highly rated, might need a little bit more polishing to his game, might need a little bit more development. But when you have a player that is willing to put in the work and has the head on his shoulders that this guy does and understands coming into the program that he's probably going to have to wait. He's not expecting to be the guy in year one like Dylan Raiola clearly was seeming to think along those lines. Then you have a guy that can help you maintain that stability in the quarterback room for years to come. When I look at Ryan Montgomery, I think he said this today, and so I'm going to steal this from him. This is not me, but I love it because I think he's right. I think it's right. Everything that, I mean, look, I don't know the kid, but just reading up on him, hear what people have to say about him, hear what he said himself, he seems to be built for this program. And let me explain what I mean by that. If you've listened to this podcast at all over the past however many years, you've heard me say many times that I believe our culture has been the separator, the great separator for this program. Of course, we are one of the, if not the most talented teams in the country on an annual basis. You have to be in order to win the national championship. But the thing is, there are many talented teams. I'd say there's, every given year, there's 4 to 5 teams that have pretty comparable level talent. And with that talent, they could win a national title. But what enabled us to rise above those teams, and not just rise above them, but just beat the crap out of a lot of those teams? It was our culture. That was a separating factor. The culture of toughness, the culture of connectivity that Kirby Smart always preaches, the resiliency, all of those things behind the scenes, putting the time in, the work ethic, the toughness, all of that. Like, it's not coach speak for Kirby Smart. It is the real deal. And it takes a certain kind of player to buy into that. It is not for everybody, y'all. It's not. It seems like Ryan Montgomery is the type of young man who is built for that type of culture. And our culture, as the separator, in my opinion, needs to be protected at all costs. You do not need to be bringing in guys that could potentially damage that culture. You don't want to bring guys in like that. Like, you don't want any cracks in the dam, right? And you bring in a guy like Ryan Montgomery, they're clearly, you never know. Things can change, right? But from all accounts right now, again, hearing what people say about him, what he says himself, he seems to be a guy that is a pretty low-risk guy in terms of protecting your culture. You bring this guy in, and he's not only going to be okay for your culture, he is going to add to your culture. Again, he's a program guy, a culture-type guy, a lot like Ryan Puglisi. There's another evaluation, right? Ryan Puglisi, when we first signed him, how did people when we first got his commitment, we didn't sign him until December, but when we first got his commitment, how did the Bulldog Nation at large react? It was kind of like, oh, okay, cool. That's cool. And then we get Dylan Raiola, number one quarterback in the country. Then everybody freaks out. Oh, yes, we got Dylan Raiola. And you forget about Puglisi. Well, Puglisi steadily rose up the rankings. Was he as polished as Raiola? No. Is he as polished as Raiola right now? No. But he's got the tools, man. He's got the physical tools. And as a guy that understands that he's going to have to go to work, he's going to have to develop, a guy that when you read what his coaches and people who know him have to say about him, the work ethic behind the scenes, the leadership qualities, that is a guy that's built for our program. That's part of our evaluation, guys. Our evaluation's not just physical, right? It's also upstairs, mentally, culturally, leadership-wise. We evaluate players in that regard as well. Puglisi passed that test, and Ryan Montgomery seems to be a guy cut from a very, very similar cloth. And even though Montgomery might not be the most talented quarterback in the class right now, and he might not be the most polished quarterback right now, not quite the level of the other guys right now, he's still really talented. I mean, turn on the tape. I wanted to do a film breakdown for you guys, but I just didn't quite have time to do that and put that together for guys. It takes a little bit more time. So I want to jump on here and give you some quick thoughts. I was getting some questions about it on social media. But you turn on the tape, and maybe we'll get to that later this week, next week. You turn on the tape, I mean, it's clear this guy's talented. Does he have the strongest arm? No, he doesn't have the strongest arm, but his arm's plenty strong enough. I would compare it, and I'm not going to say he's a carbon copy of Carson Beck, but in terms of like arm strength, similar. Carson Beck has a good arm. Does Carson Beck have a rocket? No, but it's good enough. What Carson Beck excels at, he's accurate, right? He throws a catchable ball. He knows how to layer footballs. And if you watch Ryan Montgomery on tape, you see the same things. He's consistently accurate with the football. He knows how to layer over linebackers and to fit the ball into tight windows. He's got those abilities. He's athletic. He can extend plays. I think he's more athletic than Carson Beck is. Now, Jared Curtis, a guy we got in the 2026 class, now that's to do with a rocket on his arm. Montgomery doesn't have quite that arm, but he's got what you need to play that position. And as cool as it is for a quarterback, and it is important at times, certain situations for a quarterback to have a really strong arm. I'm not going to say it doesn't matter at all, but it's way down the list of quarterback qualities for me. I would put accuracy, I would put leadership, I would put the ability to diagnose and process what's happening on the field. Those things are far more important to me than arm strength. Arm strength matters, but you're not always fitting the ball into a tight window. I mean, like, people get obsessed with like Joe Milton throw the ball like 80 yards in the air. How often are you going to ask a quarterback to throw the ball 80 yards in the air in an actual game? Like, it's cool, it's awesome, but like, does it really translate? Not always. Like, you need to be able to fit the ball in tight windows at times. You need to be able to throw the deep out from the far hash. Like, yeah, you need to be able to do that, but I've seen him do that on tape. Does he drive the ball as well as a guy like Joe Milton or like Jared Curtis in the 2026 class? No. But he still drives it well enough. And if you put the other qualities, the accuracy, the ability to layer, the athleticism, all of those things, if you put that in the equation, like, he's still got the tools to be a very, very high-level quarterback for us. He throws a very catchable ball as well. And he's not a guy that I expect to come in immediately and contend to play right away. I don't expect that, because I do think, like Puglisi, he needs a year or two of development. And it's great that he understands that. And I think that he will develop, because he is a guy seemingly that is going to come into Athens and he is going to go to work. He is a guy that will take coaching. He is a guy that will develop. A guy, as I said earlier, with an extremely high floor. And do you know what Georgia does with guys like that, with really high floors that maybe aren't quite there yet, but they're at the very least going to be good players? We take those good players, guys with high floors, and we develop them into elite players. That's what we do here at Georgia. We develop the hell out of guys like that, and they end up being big-time college football players. So yeah, I'm very excited about landing Ryan Montgomery. He's going to be a good player for us at some point. He's a guy that understands he's going to have to sit around and wait a little while and give him a couple years, and he is going to be a contender to be our starting quarterback. And probably at one point, there's a very good chance that he will be our starting quarterback. Now, the last thing here before we get out of here, as it relates to this commitment, I've got a lot of questions about Juju Lewis, right? The big five-star quarterback out of Carrollton, reclassified in this 2025 class. He has been committed to USC for a while, but he's certainly had his recruitment open. He's visited Georgia a lot. We've been recruiting him heavily. We missed on Matt Zollers. He goes to Missouri last week. Juju Lewis is still out there. Julian Lewis, by the way. It's also, his name is Julian, goes by Juju. He's still out there. So does this mean that we're just giving up on Juju? I don't think it means that we're giving up on him. I would say it makes it far less likely that we land Juju Lewis. And look, I think that was always a long shot anyway. But you got to think about where Kirby Smart and Mike Bobo are in this recruitment. Okay, so you like Matt Zollers. You really like that guy. And he's a good quarterback. Don't get me wrong. He's a really good quarterback. But you miss out on him. Okay, it happens. And you could get Juju Lewis, but he's committed somewhere else. And the odds of flipping him, while it's certainly possible, probably aren't great. It's probably more likely he sticks with USC or he ends up going elsewhere. So do you want to take a risk and put all your eggs in that basket, push all your chips in the Juju Lewis deal and say, okay, we're going for him and that's it? I don't think you can afford to do that, because we need quarterbacks, guys. We have 3 scholarship quarterbacks on the roster right now, and one's got a stress fracture, okay? Now, I know Montgomery's not going to help this year, but we've got to restock those coffers in that quarterback room. We're going to have to go get somebody from the portal this year. We're going to find a guy that's a talented young guy, but understands the situations and be willing to sit around and wait for a year or two and compete eventually. But we need guys in that room, and it's a very precarious situation to say, okay, we're going for Juju. It's Juju or nothing. If we don't get Juju, then like, whatever. Maybe we'll find somebody late in the cycle. That's tough, Because who knows when Juju's going to make that decision? He's going to stick with USC? When's he going to flip? Does he flip? Like, who knows? That could happen tomorrow. It could happen in July. It could happen in December. I mean, it could happen in February. I mean, who knows when that could actually happen? So do you want to be put in that position you're getting like leftovers? Or do you want to go ahead and tell a guy like Ryan Montgomery, who is not quite at the level right now of a Julian Lewis or a Matt Zollers, but can potentially get there? Do you tell him that, hey, look, we're going to go ahead and take your commitment if you want to commit? I think that's the right move. That's the right move. Go ahead and take this guy. And you can still recruit Juju Lewis. And, like, you tell him, hey, would love to have you. Now, is he going to want to come in with another quarterback already in this class? Probably not. Now, the way he might look at it is like, hey, I'm the 5-star guy. Like, he's not a threat to me. Maybe he'll look at it like that. But I think the odds of us landing Juju Lewis certainly went down considerably today, landing Ryan Montgomery. And maybe it is a sign that things aren't trending so well with Juju Lewis. But I think it also just simply be a sign that, hey, like, we want to make sure that we're good. Like, Juju Lewis would be a luxury, but we need to have a guy that we like in this class and not be left fighting for scraps late in the cycle if we don't end up landing Juju Lewis. So I think this was the right move. I think he's a really talented player with a high floor, and I think he's going to come in and he's going to compete. He's going to learn. He's going to take coaching. He's going to develop, and eventually, a lot like Carson Beck, it might take a minute or two, he is going to develop into a very, very good quarterback for the University of Georgia. So there you go, guys. Some quick thoughts on the Ryan Montgomery commitment. I'm going to try to put together a little film study for you guys. Try to get to that maybe later this week, early next week. No promises, but I'll give it my best shot. I want to give you guys some quick thoughts today. So appreciate you checking this out. Make sure to listen to the Glory UGA podcast wherever you get your podcast. Have a great weekend, guys. I'm Tyler, and as always, go Dogs.
Man, is there going to be some property destroyed tonight. 26-21. Dawgs on top.